Dr. Evans?
Yeah, the big storm sewer, like a 60-inch line goes through there.
Well, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot they could do about it.
Test.
Hi, Ron. How are you doing?
Should we talk him
On the agenda.
on there? Okay. And then say we have a request to
I would. Is not even pitch fast.
He's with Parks, Public Parks.
What else does Dale have?
Donorship.
Does he have a bunch on the back?
That's it.
I'd let him cover all his items and then ask Bill to come up and I can pull
That's
one and we can
12:30.
talk about it if we need to.
Getting contracts and
All right, good afternoon, everybody. We're here for our agenda review. Welcome. It's Wednesday, April 14th. Calling this meeting to order. Thank you for everybody being here. Doesn't look like we have any presentations, so we're just going to start with number one. Dale Tech, if you could take number one and then do items 12 through 22, that'd be great.
Thank you, Madam President. Let's see, item one is an appeal by DevCore LLC for an exception request to allow HDPE as a water service line from the water main to the curb stop. Current city standards allows the use of HDPE water line from the curb stop to the home. And we require copper under the roadway, or at least from the main to the curb stop. A couple of years ago, I don't know how many of you were on the council at the time, but I did a large presentation to the council about this very issue. Certainly this comes up every now and again. HDPE piping is being used, and when I'm talking HDPE today, I'm talking 1 inch, the size of my thumb. And that's for private service lines or the service lines that feed from the water mains to the home. City of Rapid City has had an outstanding history with copper. We've got copper in the ground that's probably close to 100 years old. It performs very well. Are there instances where it fails? Yes, it does. But then again, there are instances where any other product fails. I happen to live in a neighborhood where polybutylene pipe was used in the 1970s and 1980s, and virtually all of those have failed in town. It has cost the city in excess of $1 million because there was a class action lawsuit to go in and have to replace those lines. And typically when those fail, they're catastrophic. They'll wipe out a driveway and concrete and asphalt at the time. So anyway, I believe Mr. Freitag is here representing DevCore LLC, and he's got a presentation he would like to give. I'll leave that up to you as far as when you'd like to see his presentation or if you have questions from him. But once again, staff's recommendation is to deny this request. We are continuously evaluating products. We try to provide the best value for our customers. The cheapest isn't always the best value in a lot of cases. So anyway, I'll stand for any questions you might have of me right now.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Stroman.
Dale, would this, how, if at all, would this affect the insurance that's available to citizens? Would they have, you can insure your pipe, I think it's from your house to the curb stop?
It covers everything, really.
Okay.
The insurance that's available through, I forget the company that the city has partnered with, or has endorsed at least, not partnered with. This would be covered.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Evans.
So, Mr. Tech, what is it about our ground around here, our earth? Is it the pH? What is it that allows copper to be so successful for such a long period of time?
Well, we don't, the oddity of Rapid City is we don't have a singular soil type. We are blessed or cursed, if you want to look at it that way, with hundreds of different soils types due to the geology of the Black Hills and our proximity to that. There are areas that soils are called hotter, where they're more electrochemically active, where if you bury anything metallic, and when I say metallic, I'm speaking more of your cast irons and steels and stainless steels. It's more reactive for that metal. We also have other parts of towns where the soils are completely unreactive, and copper can last, or any metal really can last forever.
And is this HDPE, how long has that technology been around?
High-density polyethylene pipe, in the last 20 years, it's really taken off, if you will. Prior to that, there was PE pipe, polyethylene pipe.
Right.
The polybutylene pipe that I talked about. And the high-density polyethylene really, in the last 20 years, has come to market. And it's still evolving, quite frankly. Also, there's very few products on the shelf today that were available 5 years ago. So it's evolving as it's growing. So there's not much of a track record there to know what the long-term performance of this product is.
Okay, well, I do think it demands some study because the cost of copper has gotten to be so ridiculous. And I know that things have changed a lot even over the last 40 years in terms of these plastics, and some of them are virtually indestructible. So I think we need to study this for future, because it must add a lot of cost to any kind of building to use copper. But maybe it's people who actually do the building might tell me that.
Okay, Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Madam President. Dale, in looking at this, this is a request to allow the HDPE water service in lieu of copper from the main to the curb. What would run then from the curb to the home? Would that be copper, or would that be the HDPE, or what?
City allows either, so that's really the developer's choice, the home builder's choice.
So this is solely about from the main to the curb stop?
Correct.
And that, I assume that's in the street?
Well, it can be. Typically, our water mains are located either on the east side of the street or on the north side of the street, depending upon which direction the street runs. And so there's always one side of the street where their service lines runs all the way across the street and ties into the main. And I failed to mention earlier, one of the reasons why copper is a very good choice for under streets is it's a lot easier to locate. You can put tracer wires with other non-metallic products, but a lot of times those tracer wires get destroyed and you can't find them. So,
Yeah. Thank you.
hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Mr. Weifenbach?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to segue off of what Mr. Evans had mentioned about the pH level of the soils, and Mr. Tech alluded to the fact that they're different. I mean, even on different lots and different. So my question to Mr. Tech would be, what are these soils in this area? Are they hot? Meaning, are they?
I've never seen any data on that, so I don't
That would have been
have an
turned
answer
in
to
with
that.
this information, correct? Or, I mean, that would be something you guys would look at making a judgment call, though, right?
Well, as you said, they vary, lot by lot, block by block. Typically, the alluvials that we see along Rapid Creek.
Yeah, I'm talking about specifically this area, because I know
This-
when you
this-
guys have an application, you request that those soil samples be turned in. The reason I'm saying this is because I go back to the apartments behind Walmart when they put in copper underneath their pavement in their whole parking lot. They put copper in, and it wasn't even, it was within less than a few years, they had to pull up their whole pavement to redo it because the corrosive soils ate it up. But the fact of the matter is that if you have copper, in a hot area where there's hot soils, you got to have cathodic protection, which means you have anode bags that you hook up to these copper lines that I don't know if they get serviced or not. I'm not real familiar with that. I think Mr. Tech could probably fill you in on that to keep the electricity going through there so they don't corrode. And so my question is this area hot? I've done a lot of research since I've seen this come on. I know Colorado Springs is using HDPE. I know all the places that are rebuilding in California are using HDPE. HDPE has a lot of flexibility in the fact that, it can move a little bit more than copper can. It's a little bit more flexible. Also, they can push it underground without having to dig trenches and things like that. Personally, we're using HDPE from the curb stop in, and I'm not even sure who's responsible from the main to the curb stop. Is it the homeowner or?
Yes.
So either way, the homeowner's on the hook. If I'm a homeowner, I'm looking for HDPE because in this area where these soils, I believe, are hot. I'm not real positive, but I think Mr. Freitag's here. He could probably, when he gives his presentation, will probably talk a little bit about that. But I just wanted to segue off of what Mr. Evans said, that the soils in Rapid City, they can go from one lot to the other, but overall, generally, a corrosive area can be pretty expansive and it can do damage. And to copper, I know it's happened in North Rapid that some of the copper lines up there, after 10 years, are already got lots of pinholes over them. I'm not sure if we have a program that identifies leaks. I know that Rapid Valley uses pretty much predominantly all HDPE. The Rapid Valley Sanitation uses pretty much predominantly all HDPE, and they have contained, by the use of HDPE, they have almost contained, I don't know, as much as possible, almost perfection in their water line leakage because of that. So much that they've saved so much money by doing this that if you have a leak in your front line, you don't need insurance. They'll come fix it for you because their rates were structured to allow for so much, work maintenance to be done. Over the years, they have went through and checked out for leaks and stuff like that, replaced these lines with HDPE, and now they don't leak anymore. So now they can, if you have a leak in your front yard, you don't have to get hit with a $2,000 bill to try to fix your water line, which $2,000 probably be right in the ballpark of what it would cost you if your water main from the curb stop or from the main broke to get it fixed. So I think it's an opportunity to give it a shot in this subdivision. I like the HDPE from what I've seen of it. It's been around. I think when they denied this, the attachment was from 2013. That's what got me thinking about, hey, this is 2021, 8 years later, 7 years later.
That attachment was an ours from 2013.
The study that was attached was 2013.
Correct, that was at request of the applicant.
No, that's what you guys were quoting and why you denied it. And the other reason was you didn't have the tools. What my understanding are the tools are pretty straightforward, simple. I'm not sure exactly what they're used on 1-inch lines. And a lot of our bigger lines are already HDPE, if I'm not mistaken.
That's incorrect.
That's incorrect?
They're PVC.
Okay. Well, a lot of other cities are going to the larger HDPE. If we're still using PVC then?
That's when
On the larger like water?
When I first started the discussion, I'm talking my thumb here, the large diameter water mains, HEP is not widely used for that. PVC is. That's a completely different product.
Okay. Just thanks for clarifying that. So, but that's where I'm standing with it. I'm good with the HDPE. So.
Thank you. Mr. Solomon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Tech, you mind just for some fact-finding for me on this? We've heard that other cities use this as our kind of industry expert. Can you tell me what the reputation of using this type of pipe for this purpose is in other communities? From what you've heard or read, or
as I've said, it's not a proven product. People that are using it today, hey, they like it. It's okay. There's not a 30, 40-year track record on it. We have a great relationship with Rapid Valley in my conversations with them. Yeah, they go in and replace their pipes. Guess what they're replacing? They're replacing the Poly B, the old polyethylene pipes that were installed 30, 40 years ago. So they're upgrading that plastic with new plastic. They enjoy it. They like it. It's a product that works for them. I still think there should be more evaluation. I think we should wait a little longer to see if there are performance issues in other communities. I know Sioux Falls just recently started using it. So I think, you know, the compromise that was made a couple years ago is you can use this HDPE from the curb stop to your home.
Right.
That's an easy one to do. In our right-of-ways, under our roadways, there's a lot of other utilities there. Copper is certainly much more durable than a plastic pipe. When we have other people excavating in our rights-of-way, we believe it's a superior product, and that's why our recommendation is to deny this and to continue to use it. I'm not saying that will never change, but I think it's prudent at this time to provide the best value for our customers, and I believe that's copper.
Okay. And do you think this is something we should study further?
Absolutely.
Is this
I think
do you need direction from the council for that?
I think
or?
we should continue to talk about it. In fact, we've got an infrastructure advisory group, I think that Mr. Nordstrom is involved in, and these are the very types of things that we talk about. And as I said, it's got a mix of folks on it, engineers. I believe there's a representative of the Black Hills Home Builders on it, other folks, other stakeholders in that group, and I think certainly they will be talking about it, I know, here pretty soon, and I certainly urge them to continuously talk about it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Evans?
Yeah, I just wanted to add about that, studying it further. I mean, as far as I can tell, there's 3 reasons we have failure. One would be the joining, where things join together and the failure at a joint for whatever reason, fractures along the line, or corrosiveness and, you know, breaking through because of that. Well, in this case, all these plastics, even the old ones, are inert with regards to number 3, so it really comes down to the first 2. And if we can eliminate one of those factors altogether, it seems to me that's something we should be moving towards. So we really do need to study this.
If I may, I said this earlier, but I want to emphasize it. Most issues that you have with service lines or really anything is the installation of it. And issues of incorrect installation or someone makes a mistake that isn't apparent when they're installing it, and then it manifests itself years later. That can happen with copper, that can happen with HDPE. It happens with anything that you assemble and then bury underground. You know, I had this discussion with Rapid Valley that they're very diligent about trying to make sure that they're inspecting every bit of it that they can before it gets covered up. Unfortunately, we don't have that flexibility to have somebody on a construction site nearly full time to ensure that things look good. That's not a guarantee that there wasn't an error made or that there was a nick that is unseen by even the installers that will cause a future problem. So once again, I just want to emphasize that installation is primarily cause of failure for really anything that is underground, and then longevity is important. People can look at today and say, yeah, this looks like a great thing, but we have to look 40, 50, 80 years into the future of really what is the best thing. And as I've said, copper has performed.
Mr. Nordstrom?
Thank you, Madam President. Since my name was brought up, we haven't got to the HDPEs yet, but it is coming. We've been talking about concrete and aggregates and asphalt and everything else, and so this item is to be coming up on a future agenda. In fact, I think it's this Friday we've got another one on the IAG Infrastructure Advisory Group, and just to give you a couple of comments about the information that I've sought on HDPE, some cities have regretted putting that material in underground. Again, if I'm repeating some of this stuff, I just got in here just a little bit late, but I apologize for that part. But some cities have installed it and wish they hadn't. Other cities have looked at this and wish they'd installed the copper instead. And being somebody that's been in the trenches with copper in the past, in a previous life, it is very sustainable. And that's one of the things we need to have. And that's why I was receptive to the idea of allowing homeowners to put HDPE from the curb stop into their homes. And so that at least we get some idea about that. The other part about that, I just heard a little bit about the conversation about the cathodic process that's used for hot soils. We use that around the city right now. There's a lot of sites that we do use that around. With like anything else, I heard the comment about pinholes showing up in the copper. Well, as Mr. Tech has said, anything that goes underground, you can't expect it to last forever. And if pinholes show up, they could show up in something else. I know with the other underground utilities, we have the same issue. And it winds up to be the homeowner's problem. So there is some major concerns that should be looked at for using HDPE. So I'm probably repeating a lot of things, but I'm still on the fence about using HDPE as part of our infrastructure. So if we can get a little more time to get some more studies and letting some of the other cities give us some feedback on it, I would rather have that opportunity versus us trying this out and then finding out it doesn't work one way or the other. So I just caution that we be careful about trying out a new technology that we don't know that much about yet. Thank you. I'll yield.
Sure, Mr. Leifenbach?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As this is a work session, it gives us opportunity to think about things. And Mr. Alderman Nordstrom made the comment about some of the cities that regret. I'd like to see those studies, and I'll provide the studies where they're showing. That way I'll email them to the council that show them where they're putting it in and where they've had it and they're re-putting it in. But if you definitely have some where they regret it, we'd like to probably see those too. And then on the cathodics, I would question on the fact that those are run on batteries. So if we could get a list of all the cathodics that we have in the city and how often we replace the batteries on them and stuff like that, that would be appreciated.
That's not correct. They're not run on batteries.
Right.
Anode bags are passive. They're just buried.
And they last forever.
Well, they last for 30 or 40 years, and then the life of the pipe then takes it the rest of the way from that. So,
Yeah, there's if I may, there's an amp meter that's put on some of these units around, and so our crews go out and measure those and they log those. So so it is monitored. So and I'm not saying that's at every site, but that's what's taking place with those meters.
You want in?
I guess if you're going to call on me, I will.
I didn't. He pointed to you. That's why.
I was just pulling up some of these cities around the country that use HDPE. Austin, Texas is a good example. Indianapolis, Indiana's had all of theirs in the ground since 1992. You know, it's not like there isn't a track record for this out there. If the council really wants to learn a lot about this, I would recommend setting up a tour of WL Plastics. They produce this pipe here in Rapid City, South Dakota, and they ship it all over the country, all over the world. And it's been very reliable and becomes more and more reliable every year. I think that, you know, if we will allow it from the curb stop to the house, I don't understand why we wouldn't allow it from the pipe to the curb stop, since the homeowner's paying for it anyway. So if it does fail, it's the homeowner's responsibility anyway. You know, I believe as long as somebody's paying for it, they should have the option of what they want to do. And that's just my thought, and the fact that it's actually more reasonable to do, and as expensive as everything is nowadays, anywhere we can cut any cost is huge. So I just recommend that people actually do a little bit of research on this, look out there. There's a lot of cities around the country that have used it, that are happy with it. I haven't seen the ones that haven't been happy with it, so I'd love to have, you know, that research sent to me too. It's like anything else. You know, it's funny, this piping has been around since 1948. So it's not like there's not a lot of research out there for it, if you actually want to look at it. I think that it comes down to, we've always done this way. This is the easiest way to do it, and we should just do it this way. You know, one of the things that I find interesting is, you know, we're going to sit here, we're going to wait for research, we're going to wait for all this to come out, we're going to wait for this. Some of the best research that we could do as a council is put some of this in the ground somewhere, and 20 years from now, we're going to know. You know, sometimes you need to do your own research. So anyway, that's where I'm at. I'm looking forward to hearing what Mr. Freytag has to say, because I think he might be able to enlighten us on some things too. So thank you.
Mr. Tuck?
I guess I'd like to just make a comment. As I look around this room, I see one person in here that's responsible for all of the buried infrastructure that we have in here, and that's me. And I rely heavily on my operations folks that have worked tirelessly for years and decades to ensure that we're providing good quality infrastructure for our residents and for our community. And they feel strongly about this. This isn't just me up here saying we need to do this. This is our operations folks that have experience with all types of products. It's not a case of we've always done it, we're just going to blindly do it. I take offense to that remark. And I have to support our operations folks that live this stuff every day, 24 hours a day.
Okay, thank you. There's 11 more items,
Sure, we
12
can-
through 22.
I'll go over those quickly. Item 12 and 13 are sidewalk variance requests that are recommended for approval. Item 14 is kind of an interesting thing that really is probably not on your radar. There's a bridge that goes to the railroad depot down south of town here, and for some reason that bridge was put on city inventory a number of years ago. It's never been a city bridge. It's on railroad property. We've never had any ownership of it, and for some reason the Department of Transportation mistakenly included that bridge on our inventory. This action is to remove the bridge from our inventory. Railroad's fully aware of it. In fact, they're participating in this process with us. Items 15, 16 are standard change order items. Item 17, I know Darla will take great interest in this. This is our annual lane line painting. Every year we contract for painting our lane lines. Typically we get started in May, have most of the work done in June. In a lot of the areas, I believe we go back in the fall, the high wear areas, and repaint some of those. And then items 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22 are standard items. I'll entertain any questions you may have on those.
I see none.
Thank you.
Mr. Tuck. Okay. All right, going to community development, items 2 and 3. Vicki Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So items 2 and 3 are just standard requests that we need to bring before you because it's the demolition of contributing structures in the historic district pursuant to South Dakota codified law and our regulations that requires city council action. Sarah Hansel's here in case you would want some more information on either one of those 2 items.
I'm seeing none. Oh, wait, Mr. Weissenbach?
Madam Chair, yeah,
Okay.
I wanted to make a comment on this, and it's already gone through the historic district. They vetted whatever they had to do. There you are.
Item 2 has been reviewed, item 2 and 3 have been reviewed administratively. Because of a change in the way that the State Preservation Office issued their findings more recently, we're now aware that we need to bring these forward to the City Council. So sort of a correction to our process that we're making midway for item number 2, and then for item number 3, that one is not yet completed, but it represents the way that we will be bringing these forward in the future.
Thank you.
Mr. Nordstrom?
Thank you, Madam President. We've sat through several long conversations about these two items, and the consensus among the HPC, the Historic Preservation Commission, is that they made the recommendations to SHPO, which is the state office and for historic preservation, and they've always got some good comments, and if Sarah wants to elaborate on it, but essentially everything's been discussed pretty thoroughly at the HPC. Thank you.
Great, thank you both. Okay, moving along, City Attorney, 4 and 5, Mr. Landine, or, okay.
Okay. Kinsley Grote from the City Attorney's Office. I'll give a little bit of background on this one, and then Ms. Cushman can also talk about it as well. So back in 2020, the legislature passed Senate Bill 137, which revised provisions relating to sidewalks. And there were two main things that they did. They changed, clarified the laws on nuisance sidewalks, sidewalks that are in disrepair, and what cities can do in order to fix those. So they basically determine that cities can use a nuisance process and pass their own ordinances which deal with the nuisance side of things. And then the other thing that they did was they clarified the procedure for a municipality to order in new sidewalks. Thus, you are seeing an ordinance, 6464, to deal with those statutory changes to basically adopt a nuisance procedure for sidewalks, just the process of how code enforcement goes about sending out letters and the time frame people have for appealing it, that type of thing. So it's similar to what we have for other nuisance issues. And it also deals with ordering in new ones, and Ms. Cushman will cover that.
Right. Some of the discussion that comes up when you all review sidewalk variance requests are when can we put these in, or how do we go about ordering these in when they're needed? So Senate Bill 137 last year clarified those procedures and just said we treat sidewalk costs like other assessed projects. So really the process that would go about if the city were to decide to order in new sidewalks, and so these are new sidewalks where there aren't any sidewalks currently, is we would provide notice to the property owners to say we're going to have a hearing on the need for these sidewalks. If at the hearing the council decides that they actually are needed, the homeowners will have the opportunity to install them at their own cost, or the city will install them and then assess the cost back to the property owners. Previously, there was a little bit of an uncertainty about the process that the city would actually use to do that. It's not something that is normally something that we do. We talk about it. The council talks about it, but actually ordering in new sidewalks isn't something that we've done historically in the past. But now the process is clearer thanks to the legislature about just the process that should be used when that happens.
Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for this information. So is it fair to say then that this new ordinance is more aggressive in requesting repair and upkeep of sidewalks than what we're currently doing?
Yes, it's more aggressive in that the time frame is a little bit shorter. You, as a homeowner, get a certain number of days, 14 days, to basically put in your appeal, and you basically have to get it fixed within those 60 days. So the timeframes are locked down, and you know, for some years, we thought that the state law was unclear as to the process that should be applied to get sidewalks repaired. So in many ways, now we have a clear process, and that's what's so nice about it.
I think this is fantastic. I've never heard anyone say, gee, I wish code enforcement would take longer to accomplish their task, right? So this is a wonderful thing and a step in the right direction. And it's too bad Sarah left, because part of her and the people that are working on their overall building and city improvement plan is more enforcement of those kinds of things. So I think this is definitely a step in the right direction. I'm happy to hear it. Thank you for bringing it forward to us. That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Weifenbach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the citizens will come to us one day and go, you know what, we should enact that same thing on our roads, where they just come up and say they're nuisances and we got to fix them. But that's beside the point. So we had this conversation and talked about, you know, inspecting people's houses and rental properties and that type of stuff. And I get that's all fine and dandy when you come up with a process, but do we have a process in place that actually we're going to enact and entail and make it work? Because evidently you guys have had a little bit of ambiguity in finding out whether you were following state law or not. So I could see where that would be hard. But if we enact this, and do we have a policy and a procedure in place that we're going to do, or are we just going to let that go by the wayside too? I mean, we actually have steps that we're going to take, and we're going to actually do them. We have people in place, or somebody's in charge of doing that. Does that make sense?
I think with nuisance sidewalks, that comes in through a complaint to code enforcement. So we're working on a process because the repair of damaged sidewalks is kind of joint code enforcement and public works. We have a process in place to deal with that. But it begins, if people have problem sidewalks in their neighborhood, it begins with a call to code enforcement.
And I get all that, but I want to caution the council, if we go down this road and we do this, I understand it's all feel-good stuff, but the reality is, if you've ever had anybody try to fix your sidewalk lately, I mean, you can't even get anybody to do anything. So if there's a way that we can, you know, find a process that works, or find some people that are willing to fix sidewalks, I mean, we're going to put a lot of stress on people out there right now that have plenty of stress in the last year. I mean, I'm all for fixing the sidewalks, but I'm telling you, trying to find people to do these little jobs like this, and, you know, if a sidewalk's buckled up like this, you have to knock the whole piece out or maybe do the whole sidewalk. But trying to find people to do the work is, I mean, if they're on a timeline and a time crunch, and we just say, you just got to fix it no matter what, we're just going to put an extra burden on these people that already have a huge burden. So just want to caution you guys. I understand the reasoning behind it, but if we're going to go full-fledged enforcement on it or whatever, then we need to have a plan in place to some of these people in these houses, you know. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I guess you're pointing at me, Laura?
Well, I was trying to figure out if it was Richie, and then you, and then Mr. Landine. Let's have Mr. Landine go first, and then, okay, great.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to address that. And we do try to be reasonable. If somebody is not getting the work done because they cannot get anybody, but they are genuinely trying to, we're not going to, you know, have just strict enforcement. I think the timelines, you know, it's kind of had one comment that people are saying, well, code enforcement doesn't act quickly enough. Well, yeah, I mean, part of the problem is the balance between when there's a problem, trying to get it fixed in a timely manner, but also giving the person who's affected or needs to take action time to get somebody. I mean, they have due process rights, they have the ability to appeal. So, you know, it's trying to find the right balance between a sufficient amount of time for them to get the work done and to get these issues addressed in a timely fashion. And we do generally, with code enforcement, try to work with people, especially people who are willing to work with us. You know, if they're in contact and they're saying, hey, I'm trying to get somebody in to deal with the work, we take that into consideration. But we also have people that don't get into contact with us, completely ignore the notices, and that's where the timelines come in and where we can take enforcement action sooner rather than later, hopefully. But, you know, I think back, I had an issue once, somebody had a cottonwood tree and it was hanging over their neighbor's house. Well, it was going to cost $10,000, $12,000 for them to get the tree removed. They were more than willing to get the tree removed, but it understandably took them some time to get a contractor in place that could do it. And for them, frankly, to get the money together to do it. But they were in contact with us and they were working with us. So, you know, I would just say we try to work with homeowners who have these issues, and, you know, some of it is a case-by-case basis. So we do take that into consideration.
Mr. Nordstrom.
I'm going to, if it's all right with the council, I'll take these questions to since I'm doing the HDPE question, I'll take this up with some other cities as well, because we've been having this conversation about what to do with sidewalks. And then one of the catch-22s that we have within these sidewalks, we really can't help them out with the CDBG funding. And I stand to be corrected if Michelle wants to come up and say, no, no, no. But anyway, the issue is that it's in some cases where it's small enough, they're not qualified for being CDBG, but if we do say, for example, a whole block or something, then we might be able to do some qualifications for that. So, and again, it's a case-by-case situation, but again, I'll be happy to take this up with the other cities that I'm going to be communicating with. And stay tuned, there might be some funding that's coming down from the feds about some sidewalks coming in, and that's one of the questions I'm asking right now is, can we use some of the funding that's coming in from the feds to help us out with sidewalks? And I see Michelle's going to come up and correct me, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Alderman Nordstrom. Certainly not a correction, but just to add to that, we get those questions quite often, is that eligible? And unfortunately, a lot of times my answer is yes, maybe, but.
Yes.
Primarily, the CDBG program is to assist low and moderate income people. That's the broad-ranging target of our program. So replacing a sidewalk here and there, no, that would not be eligible. But as you stated, if it was part of a larger neighborhood initiative, and if it was listed as a high priority in our annual action plan, then those types of expenses could potentially be eligible.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. I'm going to yield. Thank you.
Mr. Evans?
Well, I just wanted to say that I'm looking at this list of requirements for what you need to replace or what's going to catch you and everything. And I know from a history of walking into the Stevens Auditorium, we had for years these panels that would split and you'd end up catching your heel and falling flat on your face. That happened to me for years. And finally, Kumar, the Buildings and Grounds, came along rather than get the excuse we can't replace them because it costs too much to lay new concrete. He hired somebody with a grinder in all the schools. They went around to all the schools and they took out those places and ground them flat. And 10 years later, it's still a workable sidewalk for a minimal cost. And so it's unfortunate that we don't have the ability, or perhaps we could, as a city, since they're city sidewalks, to have somebody on staff that once a week came around with a grinder when a person requested it and ground those joints flat. Maybe we could solve a lot of these tripping and wheelchair problems right there for not a lot of cost, a service to the community, and everybody could be happy, and a lot of people would be saving a lot of money. But, I mean, it was just so obvious how easy it was, but for 20 years, we couldn't seem to get it done in the school district. One guy made the change, so maybe we could do something like that. Thanks.
Ms. Grote, Ms. Cushman, anything else?
Nothing further from me.
Okay, thank you very much.
I can talk about the next agreement. TIF 65 TIF 65 is a TIF that's east of the intersection of Minnesota Street and Elkvale Road. It was created in 2007.
We're on number 24, correct?
Oh, I'm sorry.
25. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Item 5.
Oh, sorry, I jumped. Okay.
Sorry. Is it okay if I share about this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Perfect.
I just want to give some history because it's such an old TIF. The TIF included project costs for the construction of Minnesota Street for that intersection at Elkvale. That was not in place in 2007, so the city and the developers decided it was important from a safety perspective, but also from a development perspective. The TIF also included costs for a storm sewer, drainage pond, relocation of some utilities, and some grading work. The project was completed by 2 developers who are both associated with Zanstra. Their names don't reflect, or one of their names doesn't reflect that, so I wanted to let you know. The project wrapped up in 2011, 2012. They've been paid, and their bank has been paid out of the TIF, but we've had some outstanding kind of disputes about reimbursable costs that we've gone back and forth with the developers on, and I've worked closely with their attorneys. We now have an agreement about just what costs will be paid. Both parties have compromised. They've given some stuff up, we've given some stuff up, but we think this is a good resolution and a way to just resolve all of the issues and get the developers paid and get this money back in the general fund. I can take any questions, but I just wanted to provide that background on the area.
Mr. Evans?
I did read up on this morning, but I was still a little bit confused as to, would you classify this as one of those TIFs that didn't quite work out?
I don't think so. I don't know if I'm an expert. They didn't build all of Minnesota Street that they had been planning on. So there's a portion of Minnesota Street that's the farthest to the east portion that did not get built and still is not built today. But they built a majority of the improvements that they were planning on. This area is developed. It's there's, you know, there definitely is development in the area that's supporting the TIF being paid out.
Yeah, I guess the question I had was why it was all changed if that was the plan in the first place. That's my question. Do you think that's unreasonable? I mean,
I would just say, I mean, again, those are tough questions to answer, but at least with the first developer TIF agreement, this was honestly a very controversial TIF at the time, and it took quite a while to get approved. And the real issue that was driving it and that ultimately got it approved is that there was only one point of access into Elks Country Estates and the development going on south of the original Elks. And before the construction of the bypass, they had kind of created a secondary connection over to South Valley Drive, and the bypass cut that off. And so you had more, and if you've heard of the 40-unit rule, this was a situation where the 40-unit rule came into play, and it essentially frozen development in this area. Plus you had already a number of houses that exceeded the 40 units that no longer had a secondary access. And what ended up happening is the neighborhood, through self-help, created their own access onto the bypass. So you had people trying to, on a gravel, go over the curb and turn in and out of that development onto a high-speed divided highway. I mean, and I don't even know if it's divided at that point there. So I think you had people making left-hand turns across traffic over a curb into the neighborhood, and it was an extremely unsafe situation. And there was a lot of debate about whether it was the developer's responsibility to provide that second access because, frankly, there was some monies paid, but it got complicated because the person who was the current developer wasn't the person who got paid by the state. And the reality was that it required some extreme grading to get up to the level of the bypass, and it was expensive. And ultimately, the council decided to approve the TIF, and the primary goal of this TIF initially was to get the secondary access, which would allow further development in this area and provide a safe intersection into this neighborhood And to that extent, I would say the TIF accomplished that. Do I think it was as successful or everything that they had initially hoped to accomplish was accomplished? No, probably not, which is part of the reason why we've had these issues that we are now trying to resolve.
I think Mr. Weissenbach has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was on the council during a lot of this conversation about this. And there was a original developer involved in it on that secondary access, and he had gotten paid, like Joel had mentioned, and disputed ever getting paid. And so this never would have got done had it not been for this TIF. Did you say, is it successful? Drive over there. I live in this neighborhood. Drive over there. Check it out. Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of taxable property right now. Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of sales tax over the next few years. The traffic light that has saved several lives was sat in a warehouse for a long time before we could get the state to allow them to put it in there accident after accident. So if you're going to ask me if this is successful, I would ask you, what was the city's dollar output on this TIF, other than administrative, which is actually they get paid back for in the TIF? And I'll bet it's zero. The TIF was paid for by these people that live in this area through their taxes, and their taxes over there aren't cheap. I'll bet the cheapest house over there is probably $3,500 a year on taxes that they're paying in. So that money went to pay for all this. And I see there was a regional pond put in there, which, and I think, you know, and I know that some of you are always concerned about, are we doing things right in the first place? Having a regional pond versus a small pond is a big deal, because then it adds for, you know, other area to be able to drain into these ponds, and yeah, they're important, and trying to get one developer to pay for the future of the whole other development is tough. So yeah, it was a TIF a little bit ugly as it went through, and it spanned a couple people, and it wouldn't be fair to ask her basically what happened through this process. Joel probably came in the middle of it also, but if you go over, just drive over there and ask yourself, how much did the city pay out of the general fund for this? And it's zero. And so that's how I would judge the success on it. Going forward, this thing is huge, and they're building over there still. Did Minnesota not get built? That road's already huge. If you drive over there, it's already huge. The right-of-way is ready for if and ever when, which, because of this infinite wisdom of our city, I don't know if that thing will ever go through because of the way we treated the property owners to the east. These are the realities of this stuff, guys, when you think it through. The people that own the property farther to the east really don't want nothing to do with us because of things that transpired partly during this process and before and after. So yeah, it's a success in my mind, and it's a success in everybody that lives over there, and the people that bought $350,000 to $1 million houses that are located over there that all pay property tax. So yeah, thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, Ms. Cushman, anything else? Great. And then you want to go to 24?
Correct.
24, City Attorney. Mr. Tech, it looks like you're involved here too.
Yeah, actually, it might be better if I speak to this item. A number of months ago, there was a very similar item. There were a number of lots up off of Skyline Drive that are, for all intents and purposes, unbuildable, no infrastructure to them. The city is taking an opportunity to purchase those to add to the Skyline Wilderness area, as well as providing some elbow room for future improvements to Skyline Drive. When we get in there to do some work on it, we would certainly impact these properties. So as far as I'm concerned, it'd be much more cost effective to just outright purchase these properties than try to negotiate with an owner in the future when we need to obtain right-of-way as well as any temporary easements. So that's the purpose of this item, is to purchase those properties.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving right along, under Parks and Recreation, Director Beegler, you have one item, number 6.
Yes, this item is to set a hearing date for consideration of facility agreement between the Badlands Sabres Hockey Group and the City of Rapid City. Our Recreation Division Manager, Doug Lowe, has been working with this group along with the City Attorney's Office, and he is here to provide some background information on this.
Okay. Mr. Lowe?
Good afternoon. I also want to introduce the ownership of the Badlands Sabres organization is here also with me. If you'd stand up, Danny Battaccio and Vern Burris, 2/3 of the ownership of the team that will be coming. So it is all local ownership, which is very, very nice to have. We've been down this road before with out-of-town ownership, and it's all fallen through, so it's good that it's local ownership. With this being just a hearing date thing, I can answer more questions now or push it off to when the actual contract is asked. This is just for the hearing to set up, to go to the paper and that kind of stuff. So it's up to you. I'm here to answer any questions you want.
This is just the administrative portion of it, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Stroman?
Thank you. Doug, and I recognize the goalie's name, Mr. Battaccio. What league is this in, or what organization are we talking about? Can you give us some background on that?
Yes, this is the NA3HL, which is the North American 3 Hockey League. Division 3 is what it's, Tier 3 is what it's called. And it's a junior hockey program for ages 18 to 21-year-old young men.
And do you anticipate any issues with other interest groups wanting to have ice time there?
We've had the same groups over the last 4 or 5 years, and these guys are just going to enhance the facility because they're most of, probably 95% of their time is going to be used when no one else is in the rink. Practice times are going to be 8 to 9:30 in the morning. There's no one else in there. And their camps and stuff are run in the summertime and in the fall, early fall, late spring when we have less people in the facility itself. So actually it's a win-win for our organization and our facility.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe.
All right, thank you.
And Mr. Battaccio and Mr. Burney. Thank you for being here. Okay, moving right along, Finance Department, 7 through 11, Director Sumption.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Number 7, that standard for the volunteers to get on workers' compensation insurance. 8, what this is in a nutshell is we are refinancing a portion of the 2018 sales tax bonds, which are being used for the Civic Center new arena. And in doing so, we can save the city nearly $6 million based on estimated interest rates, as well as cut 2 years off of the repayment plan. So it frees up the vision funds a little sooner at the end of the life of the loan or the bonds as well. 9, there are, I think, 2 cleanups and 1 snow removal on that one. 10, this is for some parks equipment, I believe. And 11, that's a standard agreement we see every year where the 2 electric co-ops come in and request a 1% fee instead of the normal 2% because they still pay property tax and all that other stuff with us.
Mr. Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam President. Pauline, I haven't had a chance to look at my emails all morning this morning, but I wanted to say I enjoyed reading number 8, the agreement, and trying to understand some of the terms that are used in there. So it was, after I got done reading it, it was kind of like deer in the headlight look. So if you responded by email, I apologize. I haven't had a chance to read over emails, but go ahead.
I did, but it was right before this meeting started because I too have been busy all morning in meetings and such. Mr. Nordstrom's email asked about non-ad valorem taxes because some research showed that special tax bonds are not usually paid by non-ad valorem taxes. And this is actually a revenue bond through our state statute, which is paid by non-ad valorem taxes, which is the sales tax.
Thank you.
Mr. Solomon.
Pardon me. This is just a thank you, once again, Pauline, for looking out for the taxpayers and doing what we can to save money by looking at these opportunities. And so you've done this several times since I've returned to the council. And it's more of an acknowledgement and a kudos and a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
And then if I might, the very last item is our supplemental appropriation.
Number 26?
Yeah, it's pretty standard, and it's just first reading.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving to number 23, Vicki Fisher or Michelle Schulte, or both?
If you've got questions, Michelle's here to answer, but the city council's already approved this project, and this is just the contract that's associated with it.
Do we have the links for this item? I don't know who to ask the question to, but item 23 did not have any links to it. Is there links available for that?
Yeah, that's what I was planning to do. Yeah.
I'm sorry, say that again. They're on there? Okay, thank you.
Madam President, so Michelle did identify before the meeting that they were struggling getting those links there. She had made them available. They just weren't available for you folks to look at. But thank you, Shannon. They're there now. Good job.
Thank you. All right, so we have 23, we have 24, we have 25, 25 standard, we went over 26. Okay, we do have a public comment. We have a Mr. Bill Freitag.
Madam Chair.
Welcome, Mr. Freitag. Thank you for being here. We did receive these handouts. Does everybody have a copy of these handouts? Jason, did you get that? Good luck on Friday.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
If you could speak up into the microphone. There you go.
Is that better?
Perfect. Mr. Evans, can you hear that okay?
My name's Bill Freitag. I'm the owner of DevCore LLC. In reference to your agenda item number 1, okay, about the HDPE pipe. Little confusion here. I sat through all of this. I'm not asking for an exception for HDPE pipe for the city of Rapid City or for everybody. I made a request, a specific request for my development for 43 lots. That was it. This wasn't for everything in Rapid City. This was for my lots. You got to make that distinction. All that conversation you were having was as if we were going to change the design criteria manual to allow HDPE pipe. That's not my request. I made a request specifically in my subdivision to use it, okay? Now, the reason I did, and we all said it, and you listened to Mr. Tech talk about it, corrosive soils. In my subdivision, I have corrosive soils. Okay, corrosive soils has a negative effect on copper pipe, and more than that. I got a bolt here I want you to look at that's not even 20 years old, that the hot soils, the corrosive soils have ate up. So I'm going to pass these out to you. when you look at these, you should look at the size of the holes. These aren't pinholes in these copper pipes. One of them's half the size of a dime. The other ones are a lot larger than what you would call a pinhole. But if you look at that bolt, that's the most telling thing. That bolt that I'm passing around to you, look how much that bolt got ate up. Now that bolt started out as a 1/2 inch bolt or a 3/8 inch bolt, and look at it. That came off, recently came off a fitting for a water main, and the contractor who replaced that wanted to replace the whole fitting, but the city said no, it didn't need any replacement, so he on his own replaced those bolts, and that's where I got that bolt. So we in fact have corrosive soils in Rapid City. So now I want you to look at what I handed you, which is mark number 1. To make a determination whether or not we have hot soils or corrosive soils, we have to hire a soils engineer. I hired a soils engineer. I gave you his document. It's NTI. At the bottom of his document, it says, all cases show that the area is likely to have high corrosive potential. So he didn't just study one thing, he studied 2 or 3 different things, and everything he studied says Bill Freytag's Prairie Fire subdivision is more than likely going to have high corrosive soils. All cases show that the area is likely to have high corrosive soils. So these pipes and these bolts that you're looking at, that's what I don't want to put in this place, because I have high corrosive soils. Not because Bill says it, but because my engineer says it, the soils engineer says it. Okay, are we good with that? There's one engineer there. The soils engineer said it. Let's look at number 2. That same soils engineer wrote me this letter because I requested it. He said HDPE pipe, HDPE is a corrosion resistant and inert alternative to copper pipe. And he said for my subdivision, where he did these soils tests, that this was a good pipe to put in. That's my soils engineer again. Okay, now let's look at we'll let you read number 2 there. Let me know when you're ready to go to my number 3. Okay, let's look at my number 3. This is the cover sheet of a May 31st, 2013 technical memorandum that the City of Rapid City paid Banner Engineering to do, along with another engineering firm, Black & Vetch, in 2013, okay? This is the memorandum in my denial. If you go to my denial that's in your attachments, this is the document they went to and said this was the reason that they denied me. Okay? Now that's all, I'm not making any of this up, you got it all in writing. All right, let's look at number 4. Number 4 is page 29 of the city's Banner, Black & Vetch technical memorandum. And it says HDPE pipe is electrically non-conductive. This pipe material is an excellent choice. If you have high corrosive soils, if you got hot soils, Black & Vetch, who was honest with everybody when they did this, when Banner hired Black & Vetch to help them, honestly said, if you got hot soils, use this HDPE pipe, it's an excellent choice. I have hot soils. My soils engineer's telling you I have hot soils. My soils engineer's telling you HDPE pipe is what Freytag should be using in his subdivision. I'm not asking for the whole city. I'm asking for an exception for my one place. And let's look at number 5, because this came up in your conversation about who's paying for it. Well, Black and Vetch on page 48 and 49 makes a comment to allow more landowner say. Why do they want to have more landowner say? It's what you guys all talked about. It's because the landowner's paying the freight. He's paying for it. So then they provide you a drawing down here that shows from the curb box to the house. This is Black and Vetch's work, not mine. From the curb box to the house, and they recommend there that you could use HDPE pipe because the homeowner's on the hook for it. Now look at the drawing from the curb box to the main. On their drawing, they're saying the city is responsible for it. Well, as far as they're concerned, they thought that's what it was, but not in Rapid City. Rapid City is not responsible for that. The homeowner's responsible for that. If the homeowner's paying the freight, he ought to have something to say about what he's having to pay for. Now, these copper pipes that you're looking at, I know for sure 2 of them came out of the ground at 11 years old. Okay? And you know what went back in? And these were homeowners. These are cities of Rapid City. Homeowner responsibility out in the street, not from the curb box to the house. Digging up a street. 11 years old, that pipe failed. He couldn't put HDPE back in. He put copper back in. Do you think in 11 years the new piece of copper is not going to look any different than that piece of copper? That's why Black and Vetch says if you're paying the freight for this stuff, you ought to have a say in what's happening with it. Now, with this homeowner that I'm talking about, he's going to pay for this pipe 3 times. He paid for it when he bought his house. He paid for it. He was responsible for the payment of it when the pipe in your hand got dug up and replaced. And you know what? In 11 years, not 100 years, not 40 years, that pipe lasted 11 years. In that amount of time, he's going to pay for it again because he couldn't put a pipe in there that works well in hot soils. Remember, I'm only asking for my subdivision. I'm not asking for the whole city here. I don't want to come back here 11 years and be taking out pipes. And I have hot soil. Let's look at number 6. In that study that Black and Vetch did, there was two municipalities that they leaned pretty heavy on and they wrote kind of extensive on in that study. One of them, miraculously, is Rapid Valley Sanitary District. And they quote them in there. And the other one is the city of Colorado Springs. Now this was 2013. In 2018, the city of, I've read that, and I'll get it for you if you want it, it's the Design Criteria Manual for the city of Colorado Springs. In 2018, an HDPE pipe is allowable and you can use it in Colorado Springs. In Rapid Valley, when Rusty wrote this letter for us back in 2018, here's what he had done. He got invited, probably by Robert, one of the previous Public Works Director, invited Rapid Valley Water to come and enjoy with them a new technology to find leaks, and they were doing it in the city of Rapid City, and they invited Rapid Valley to come. It was a new technology. It was expensive. It cost a lot of money to get these guys there. Rapid Valley came, and they were there with them for 2 weeks. The next 2 weeks, Rapid Valley, or the next time, Rapid Valley was expected to pay $4,000 or $5,000 of the cost and opted out. So what Rapid Valley did at that point was made a decision to buy the machine themselves, what you should have done, what you should do. You should get this guy from Rapid Valley here and ask him how he fixed these water leaks and use it for a model. He bought the machine, and then he started he put a routine maintenance schedule in place. He operated that schedule. Every time he found a leak, he replaced it with HDPE pipe. As a result of stopping all those leaks, he cut his cost, his initial cost, his fundamental cost of water. When he cut that, it cut his initial cost enough that he did a rate decrease, not increase, a rate decrease to the people of Rapid Valley because he was saving money on water. And he kept going with his program over and over and over and over and over again. He found more leaks, more leaks. Finally, he come to the conclusion that from the curb box to the house wasn't his responsibility, but if it leaked, the homeowner wouldn't call him, and he's still leaking water. But he says, I'm saving so much money by stopping these leaks, I'm going to take the responsibility for payment from the curb box to the house. And he did. And he found a bunch more leaks. And he stopped them, and he fixed them, and he fixed them with HDPE pipe. Today, Rapid Valley Water, that has about 25% of the users that the city of Rapid City does, and they run that water system with probably 5% of the personnel that the city of Rapid City uses, and this is probably the best run water system in West River. He wrote me a letter, and in that letter, if you look at the very last thing he said, was less cost, no corrosive soil problem, easier leak detection, saves on water loss. He said to that's why you can't put copper back in his place. You've got to use HDPE pipe. Recently, in fact, in the 3-mile limit now, today, if I'm developing within the 3-mile limit and the city of Rapid City or some other source, city of Rapid City isn't supplying my water, Rapid Valley is, I put in HDPE pipe. I don't put in copper. And I'm still in the 3-mile limit. Okay, let's look at number 7. Number 7 is my design engineer, KTM. It's signed by the president of KTM. The president of KTM said, Freytag subdivision's got hot soils. He should use HDPE pipe. So don't take my word for it. Take my design engineer's word for it. Take my soils engineer's word for it. And take Black and Vetch's word for it, where they said HDPE pipe is an excellent choice if you got hot soil. I have hot soil. Undoubtedly, I've got hot soil. I proved it to you by giving you all the documentation from the soils engineer. So do not grant me my exception. I'm not asking for the whole city. I don't care what you do somewhere else, but in my place, I don't want to put this copper in the ground. If you got any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Freytag. We're not going to take any action today, but we do appreciate you providing these packets. We have a comment or question for Mr. Evans.
Okay. I'm going to go through a few things. We get it that it's just your property, but we do have a process, so we have to vet it a little bit and find out what the process is if we're going to grant an exception. And we trust Mr. Tech. He's a city employee. We value his opinion too. We wanted to find out why it's been denied. We may overrule him, maybe not. But we get it. I think the handout you gave us was excellent. And I get the fact that the soils are different. I've been in my house over by Robbinsdale for 26 years. I've never had a copper pipe failure. My mom's house right next to Pinedale School, every year we had to call in DD Plumbing and have him put something in. Just different water in town, so I get that. And these are very effective to show what's going on. But lastly, I'd appreciate it if you didn't kind of yell at us when you're asking this, personally, because I'm just trying to find out so I can make a decision. So that would be my request.
I apologize.
of you.
I didn't realize I had raised my voice to you. I was trying to
Okay,
speak loud
thank
enough so
you.
you could hear me in here.
Well, as a person who's been accused of that a lot in their life over 40 years of teaching, the tone was a bit hostile. So I'd ask to maybe, temper it a little bit. That's just my request of you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Tech.
Can I pick up my samples?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Is this thing working? Sure. That better? I thank you for handing me this handout that Mr. Freitag brought. There's a couple things I'd like to bring to your attention. On page 2, the person that wrote this opinion is not a registered professional engineer. Same with page 7. Neither Adam Dando or Kyle Trelaw are licensed engineers in the state of South Dakota. They cannot offer an engineering opinion. If they do, they're going to be in violation of South Dakota Board of Technical Professions and South Dakota administrative rules. So just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Any more comments?
Can I respond to that?
Wait 1 second. Anyone need else to speak?
That, Adam signed that from NTI. I talked to his engineer. His engineer's name is Earl, I can't think of his last name, Earl. And Earl was, had him write it, and Earl is reviewing it. Earl, I'll get you Earl's signature on it. Earl's looked at it, but Earl, I didn't have enough time. Earl didn't have enough time to get it to me before 12:30 today. But I'll get you a signed copy with Earl's signature on it, who is a licensed engineer.
Thank you again, Mr. Freitag. And this matter will be addressed on Monday evening's council meeting as well, and will give us some more time to do some more in-depth research in this. So thank you again for showing up. I do not have any more public speaker request forms. However, Mr. Weifenbach requested to speak about retiree benefits. So we're just going to address that before we adjourn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and
Go
I
ahead.
appreciate the opportunity, and I'm sorry I didn't get it ahead of time. I had trouble understanding the whole, but I did have a conversation with Mr. Landine, but I want the council to weigh in on what has happened to the retirees and close to people's retirees' benefits. So, because we're using a law, we're using Dillon's law, and there's interpretations of Dillon's law, of course, but the city of Rapid City made a contract with these employees. Some of them said, you know what, I'm going to come to work for Rapid City, and I'm going to work 20 years, and maybe my pay is not going to be the greatest, but I'm going to get some benefits at the end. They're going to be defined benefits or whatever have you. And so they put in and they got the retired, and they've been on retirement. Some of them are close to retirement at this point. And then we say to them, I was just kidding you. So I want this council to weigh in on a direction that we can give our city staff and our city attorney to either work with the state or not work with the state. If the council is fine with that, just cutting those people off, then that's the way it would be. I would rather see, personally myself, the opportunity to give our legal system a chance to work with the state legislators, do what we need to do to see if we can come to a resolution that would stand behind the commitment that this city, previous staff people, previous council people committed to these people that are retired. If we see that it's a burden that we can grandfather it in or whatever the case may be, I'm good with that. Don't necessarily know that we need to pay people's, once they get on to Medicare. I don't know necessarily if that, but that's a conversation that can be had at that point too. But I do feel like I wanted to weigh in and say that I think that there's some room there that we can work with the legislator. Richie's already volunteered to go to prison if anybody gets busted for this deal, so we're covered on that avenue. So I'd just like the rest of the council to weigh in and see if we could, on Monday, get time to think about it. I would encourage you, I know it would take a lot of Joel's time, if you had time to visit with him about, I spent 30 minutes visiting with him about different ideas and things, so.
Great, let's defer to our city attorney, and it looks like Director Strood is here as well. The legality.
Is this on? Okay.
Yes, it is.
I mean, I feel pretty confident about the legality of it. I mean, as far as, is there a way to fix it under the current statutes? I think it's pretty hard. One of the things that Alderman Weifenbach and I did talk about is, there is a potential legislative fix. The difficulty is we just ended the legislative session. Are we going to continue and make a payment that doesn't look like we're legally authorized to make for a year, waiting for a legislative fix? I would also caution you, sometimes we think things make perfect sense and we go to the legislature and we don't get a warm reception. So, the idea that we're just going to go to the legislature and they're going to clean this up, it's a possibility, but I also wouldn't get my hopes too high. The difficulty, as I expressed to Alderman Weifenbach, is, if we were just talking generally, like, what are our benefits moving forward, that's a policy question that you guys would have probably been more heavily involved in, and it would have happened over a longer time frame. The reason this looked different and felt different was because it's a legal matter, and we needed to be brought into compliance. And sometimes, when it's a gray area or a close call, we may get your input and let you know there may be a potential risk to continuing what we're doing, but that there is a defensible. In this case, frankly, despite some of the stuff I know you've been provided by union personnel and things, it's not really a close call. And the finance officer and I have an obligation to make sure that we're in compliance with the law. This hasn't. When you talk about things being missed, I'm surprised this hasn't shown up in our audit, but I suspect now that this is being talked about publicly, it's probably going to now show up in our audit. So it's not going to be something easy to fix. At this point, obviously, when we came to you and briefed you on it, our goal was to get the city into what we believe it would take to get into compliance with the law. I have done further research, and honestly, it looks like the 50% cap on retiree health care was adopted by the legislature in 1965. So, probably the person I deal with on a daily basis has been with the city for a while, the mayor. Mayor became a police officer in the early 1980s, and this was a benefit going back into the 1980s. So for law enforcement and for fire.
I think Mr. Nordstrom and Mr. Evans want to weigh in? And Mr. Roberts.
Okay.
In that order.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Landine, I've got some additional information to provide for you, and you've probably researched this already, but I wanted to make sure that we're on the same page, is that the information I've got right now is subsection 1, 91435.1. It gets into flexible spending accounts, and my curiosity got me into the area of what I used to know as a cafeteria plan. Is that allowable under this provision, so that the employees can at least do this? There's some other terms that I could throw around, but can they get into a cafeteria plan?
I can't answer that right now. And I think there's some federal rules on cafeteria plans that it may have to be an active employee. But, it really is two separate issues. And that was a perfect example of Dillon's rule and what we're talking about, in that the statutes did not address cafeteria plans. It was just silent. So if you were a home rule city, it didn't say you couldn't do a cafeteria plan, so you could do one. But for a city like Rapid City that's non-home rule, we needed, or somebody thought at some point, we needed specific authority to do a cafeteria plan, because we do offer our existing employees a cafeteria plan, and that was the specific statutory authorization that allows us to offer our employees a cafeteria plan.
Thank you, and I appreciate the clarification. And then the other area is the concern that I've been getting from the former AFSCME represented employees is that percentage-wise, they're the one that's going to be hit the hardest on this. So if there is some possible way, and I'm becoming reluctant about going to the legislature. I'd like to visit with them first before I go to the, take this up with the legislative level, but just knowing that it could backfire on us if we try to fix it from that level. So if there's some other alternatives to look at, and a little bit of memory that I have on the severability clause that we have in the contracts, that's, again, a separate issue. Am I stating that correctly?
Well, I mean, I don't think this provision, the fact that we can't fulfill that, is going to, usually what a severability does is say, if one provision of this contract is struck down, it doesn't strike down the whole contract.
Right.
So,
right.
I
agree.
I think this doesn't impact the whole contract. It just impacts the provision that it relates to.
And if I understand it correctly, and I'm sorry, I apologize for belaboring this point, but I just wanted to make sure that I'm clear on this, is that the difference between, and I'm referring to just specifically right now, the AFSCME bargaining unit, is that there is a difference between the retirees and the employees, so that they are not covered by the contract. Am I stating that correctly?
I mean, that would be our position, is that, yes, the retirees are not actively covered by the contract. However, you know, what it gets into is an employer can change your retirement benefits right up, absent a contract that prevents it, but they can change your retirement benefits right up to when you retire. But some of your benefits when you retire vest. You become vested in them, so generally you don't go back and change the benefits for people, and that's where I think a lot of the heartburn is, like, hey, we already retired, this was a benefit, we're entitled to it. The problem becomes is this is an employment contract just like any other contract, subject to contract law. So you have a provision that potentially violated law because we did not, according to the statute, have legal authority to grant the benefit to the extent we granted it, okay?
Yep.
And a way I could analogize it for you so maybe you can understand why it wouldn't vest is right now, I'll make it topical, we're having a statewide discussion. It looks like marijuana is going to become legal. So if we had a provision in our contract that said once marijuana becomes legal, that we would provide an ounce of marijuana to all our retirees once a month, right, while it was legal, that would be potentially fine. But then if in a couple of years the legislature came back and said, well, this is a huge mistake, we shouldn't have done that, or the people shouldn't have done that, and they repeal that, and now marijuana becomes illegal again, even though we have a contract that says we will provide you that, we can no longer fulfill that requirement because it is now illegal, and we would be violating the law by doing that. So that kind of explains, you can't say, hey, well, we negotiated in good faith to get this benefit, and you can't, even though they've changed the law, you can't do it. What further complicates this and makes it a worse situation is this wasn't a recent law change. I mean, this is something that clearly goes back. It was missed at some point in the distant future or distant past, and it was missed, and it just happened to be caught. And
if you would just, thank you, and I'll wind this up with, I'm just asking again, if you would take another look at 914.35.1 and see what that does for us, or if that is an area that we can actually have some more discussion on. So I'll yield at this point and then make that request. Thank you.
And to clarify, that was just a hypothetical.
That was a hypothetical.
We don't want that being the leading headline tomorrow.
Hypothetical.
We don't want snippets.
But I think it was, the legality of it was more obvious than when you're talking about percentages of a payment.
Right.
So, I mean, I think to everyone that the legality of that would be pretty obvious.
Right, that was an excellent point, but we don't want snippets. Okay, great. Mr. Evans and Mr.
I
Roberts.
just have a quick question. Is this simply a municipal employee thing, or does it apply to other state entities like school districts? Or is there a separate one for them?
There's probably a separate one for them, and I guess I could look and see if they have a similar restriction, because if you were going to go to the legislature, certainly if counties or the state can pay 100%, but that would support allowing or amending this statute to allow it for municipal employees. But this is in the chapter governing municipal officers and employees. So this provision in particular is, but I do suspect, in fact, I think Wade Nyberg in my office pointed out there was a legislative change, I think, maybe this past legislative session, changing that so that it's 50% for state employees too, limiting it to 50%. So again, that would probably undermine our ability, if the legislature just reduced state to 50%, probably undermine our ability to go to the legislature and convince them we should be at 100%.
Well, the only reason I've asked that is because, I mean, there's countless problems like this in school districts all the time, and the reduction of benefits that you thought you had. For instance, the day I signed to my beginning of my 40-year career with the schools, I was promised a 6-month sabbatical. And then all of a sudden that went away. So I had to work 40 years without a break, which is ridiculous nationwide if you look at what's going on. So I know those changes happen, but I'm always curious when people are vying for an answer to a question that nobody's asking and wondering where it's coming from, because it's been on the books for 40 years or 50 years, and all of a sudden now we got to have an answer today. So yeah, and so I'm curious about that, but I do agree with Mr. Weifenbach. Maybe we can come to some compromise where we grandfather it out, it's eased out over 7 or 8 years, because all of a sudden, bam, it is a problem when people don't have time to plan for it. It's different to plan over 7 years rather than in 6 months. So maybe we need to come up with that kind of a compromise. Thank you.
Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the great comments, Bill. You and I think too much alike sometimes. It scares the hell out of me. So anyway, Mr. Landine, have we looked into how we're going to sever this legally right now, so no longer, because I imagine this is in the union contract that they get paid this. How does that get removed from the union contract?
Well, as you're all aware, the unions are having a hard time accepting it right now, so I don't know that we're going to unilaterally change it. It's just to the extent the language in the contract would violate state law, we're just not going to enforce it, or we're not going to follow it. But yeah, when the new contracts are ratified, that language will be removed, and the language will reflect what the law allows, which is the 50%.
You know, just one thought off the top of my head while I was listening to this discussion is, this money is already budgeted for. So why couldn't we structure this as some kind of a payout for the existing employees over the next 7, 8, 10 years? As they fall off, that money goes back into the general fund. Because I think we need to take care of our current retirees. I think that we are going to have to sever it because it's against the law, even though it's been against the law ever since I've been alive, which is interesting that it's found right at the moment that if we only had home rule, we wouldn't have to do this. I mean, the timing is just so suspect. But anyway, that's just my feeling. And I think there's ways that we can, as a council, we can make this right for our employees. So anyway, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Weifenbach.
If you're going to err, it makes common sense to err on the side of the people that we trusted for the last 20 or 30 years to do their jobs. If they hadn't done their jobs, if the process worked, they would have been fired. My God, that we're having this conversation completely blows my mind. It really does. It really does. I know against the law or whatever, and I understand, and I'm not blaming this on the city attorney, don't get me wrong, he's just the messenger making, telling us our options, and we've had this conversation about, the comment came up, which I took offense to, and now I'll talk about it, was my stance on the Dick and Jane and how some people voted against it. When it was that was a clear-cut case, clear-cut First Amendment right problem, boom, we lose. This is not as clear-cut. And if you have home rule, Dillon's Law does not go away. It does not go away because you have home rule. So don't let anybody fool you guys. That doesn't happen. There's study after study. I'll share with the ones I have with you that are about this thick that talk about it. Just because you make arbitrary and capricious laws doesn't mean they can be enforced. Somewhere along the line, the city employees, if I'm one of you guys sitting out there as a city employee, I hope to God you're listening, because I want you to know that this council's behind you, and we're going to stick up for you, and I'm going to stick up for you for the very end. We did something. We made a deal with you. When I make a deal with somebody, that's a deal. I don't even need a contract. I don't need anything. That we're having this conversation and just demoralizing these people already even more. I mean, I know they're going through wage negotiations and stuff like that that we haven't been involved in, which really upsets me, because in the past we've been involved in that. We understand what's going on. And if you're a city employee and you want to call me, you call me. Call your council members. Trust them. Give them the information that you're not getting. But I think moving forward, there's an opportunity. I think Alderman Roberts alluded to it, Alderman Evans alluded to it, that if the legislator doesn't want to work with us, fine. If somebody wants to sue us, fine. We've been sued before. I'm willing to take that risk, if it helps our employee morale and it shows the employees that we do care about what they do. We do care about their 20 or 30 years that they put into service. We do care about them putting their lives on the line every day. We watch it up in Minnesota, watch what's happening up there. The cops can't even pull anybody over. They may get shot. If they have to shoot back, they may go to prison. I'm not interested in going down that road. I'm interested in the deal we made with these people. I'm interested in finding a good solution. I understand, and I think Joel's given us the advice that he thinks is best. I appreciate that, and like I mentioned to him. But I think there's room that we can look at this, and at least you guys can weigh in on it and give your thoughts on it. That's why I brought it up. So I appreciate it, Madam Chair. Thank you for putting it on there for me. I'll try in the future to get it.
Thank you for bringing it forward. Thank you, Mr. Landine, for your input, and thank you to my colleagues for the good discussion on this. Let's adjourn, and we'll follow this conversation on Monday at our regular city council meeting. Thank you.